The Dennis Martin Mystery. A 6-year-old boy vanished in broad daylight in front of his family and was never seen again. No footprints, no body, just silence. This isn't a ghost story, it's real. And 50 years later, the mystery still haunts everyone who tried to find him. What I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you think you know about how children disappear, because this case breaks all the rules. A day meant for joy that turned to horror. June 14, 1969, Father's Day weekend in the Great Smoky Mountains. The Martins were seasoned campers who knew these mountains well. This was supposed to be just another fun weekend. Bill Martin, his wife Lois, and their 2 boys, Dennis, 6, and Douglas, 9, had joined Bill's brother Clyde and his family at Spencefield, a popular camping spot 5,000 feet up in the mountains. 6 people total. Perfect weather, clear skies. Dennis was the kind of kid who made camping trips memorable. Blonde hair, bright blue eyes, fearless but obedient. His father later described him as all boy. Always moving, always exploring, but never the type to wander off without permission. The sky was clear, the boys were laughing, and just minutes later, one of them would be gone forever. But how does a child vanish into nothingness when he's surrounded by people, in daylight, in a contained space? The game that sealed his fate. Sunday, June 15th, 4:30 p.m. The families were packing to leave when Dennis and his older brother Douglas came up with what seemed like a harmless prank. The plan was simple: sneak around behind a ridge of mountain laurel bushes about 150 yards from camp, then jump out and surprise the adults. Douglas would take one side, Dennis the other. They'd emerge simultaneously to startle everyone. It was the kind of innocent game that happens every weekend in parks across America. Except this time, something went terribly wrong. Douglas reached his position and waited. Dennis never appeared. "I thought he was just hiding," Douglas later recalled. "But then I started to feel that weird silence." Douglas called out. No response. He went around to Dennis's side of the ridge. Dennis was gone. But what made it worse was what wasn't there. No trace, no noise, no explanation for how a 6-year-old could simply disappear in minutes. What could have happened in those few silent minutes? When hope turns to desperation. When Douglas returned to camp alone, Bill Martin wasn't immediately worried. Kids play extended hide-and-seek all the time. But as minutes turned to an hour and their calls echoed unanswered through the valleys, the family realized something was seriously wrong. Here's what made this disappearance so immediately terrifying. The area was contained. The ridge of mountain laurel formed almost a natural fence, limited ways in and out. Douglas had been on one side, the campsite on another, and the remaining sides led to either thick undergrowth or steep terrain difficult for a child to navigate. By evening, Bill Martin made the call no parent should ever have to make. What happened next would become the largest search operation in Great Smoky Mountains history. But even that wouldn't be enough. 1,400 people, 56 square miles, and no trace. Within hours, dozens of rangers and volunteers arrived. By morning, over 200 people were searching. But as word spread, something extraordinary happened. They came from everywhere: experienced hikers, local hunters who knew every inch of these mountains, National Guard units, FBI agents, bloodhound teams, even Green Berets training nearby joined the effort. The numbers were staggering: over 1,400 people at the peak, covering 56 square miles of rugged terrain. Helicopters flew grid patterns. Bloodhounds followed every possible trail. And they found absolutely nothing. Not a piece of clothing, not a footprint, not even a broken branch. It was as if Dennis had stepped into another dimension the moment he disappeared behind those bushes. How do 1,400 trained searchers find no trace of a 6-year-old boy? How is that even possible? The clues that whispered, then went silent. On day 2, hope flickered. A tourist at a nearby lodge reported hearing a child crying in the woods Sunday evening. Distant cries from the direction of the search area. Teams immediately focused on that location. They found nothing. Then came reports of a disheveled man in the mountains. Long hair, torn clothing, acting strangely. Some searchers spotted him watching the search efforts from a distance, but every time they approached, he vanished into the forest like smoke. Days were spent tracking this wild man. Like everything else in this case, the lead evaporated into nothing. But those weren't the only strange details that would emerge. The heartbreak that never ends. 2 weeks later, the official search ended. 1,400 people had done everything humanly possible. Every resource, every technique, every square inch searched multiple times. Bill and Lois Martin refused to leave. They couldn't accept that their youngest son had simply vanished. Bill hired private investigators and psychics. The family offered rewards, followed every tip, every wild theory. Nothing led anywhere. Dennis Martin had become a ghost story that was terrifyingly real. The unanswered questions that still haunt us. 50 years later, 3 questions still torment everyone who knows this case. Why didn't the bloodhounds catch a scent trail? These were expert tracking dogs who should have found something. Who was the wild man seen watching the search? And why did he disappear every time someone got close? How could 1,400 people search 56 square miles and find absolutely nothing of a 6-year-old boy? Theories from logic to nightmare. The conventional theory: Dennis got lost and succumbed to the elements. But after 5 decades, no remains have ever been found in one of the most thoroughly searched areas in American history. The sinister theory: the mysterious wild man took Dennis. Hermits and fugitives have hidden in national parks before, but no evidence has ever surfaced. The impossible theory: Dennis's case fits a pattern researcher David Paulides documented in his Missing 411 series. People vanishing in national parks under circumstances that defy explanation, in areas searched thoroughly with no trace found. When a child disappears in a crowd, we blame the crowd. But what do we do when a child disappears in open nature, surrounded by people, and the earth gives back no trace? The legacy of silence. Today, Dennis Martin would be in his 60s. His parents died without answers. Douglas spent his life wondering if he could have done something differently. The case remains officially open, though no new leads have emerged in decades. The Great Smoky Mountains still draw millions of visitors. Families still camp at Spencefield. Children still play games and explore. But for those who know Dennis's story, there's always a shadow in these beautiful mountains. Maybe the scariest mysteries are the ones that leave nothing, no reason, no closure, no end. They remind us that our world still holds secrets that human understanding cannot crack. The next time you're in the wilderness, remember Dennis Martin, a boy who played a simple game of hide and seek and became one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. Because sometimes people don't just disappear. They vanish so completely that it's as if they never existed at all. And that's infinitely more terrifying than any ghost story you've ever heard.